I am once again asking to speak with the most regulated and honest part of you. Too many of us are confusing reason finding with excuse making and finding ourselves in the same situations over and over that call out the absolute worst of us. Let me explain. Something I have dealt with over the course of my life is a real struggle with truth telling. I know being dishonest is one of the most taboo and stigmatized things within our culture. Walk with me. One of the biggest lessons I learned from my particular upbringing is that it is not safe to tell the truth. And unfortunately, being a child during my upbringing, I wasn't able to learn that lesson with any level of discernment. So over the course of my life, when I would find myself in situations that would provoke incredibly hostile, defensive, or fearful responses, I would default to being dishonest or to a myriad of other really maladaptive survival tactics that I had learned over the course of my life. And when I would seek to interrogate these responses or interrogate these behaviors, the moment that I would start to get to the bottom of something, this little switch in my brain would flick saying, but that's not an excuse. So instead of spending time in the sovereignty of my own mind, a place that is literally for me, by me, understanding the root causes of my behaviors and patterns, I would cut off the potential for wisdom at the knees, ultimately leading to cycles of behaviors and patterns where ultimately I didn't understand where they were coming from, why I was doing it, and felt like I was fully in the passenger seat of some of the most awful, out of alignment behaviors, out of alignment situations that you could imagine. Self-reflection isn't just about punishing ourselves against the penultimate best version of ourselves that we can be. Self-reflection involves asking good faith questions and allowing ourselves to respond from where we are. This is where discernment comes in. There is a profound and fundamental difference between using the reasons or the logic or manufacturing reasons and logic to justify current patterns or behaviors that are not serving you, versus trying to figure out where they come from, what types of environments, what types of people, what types of situations trigger them so that you have a snowball's chance in hell of being able to intervene at critical intervention points. So during the time that I was working really hard with my honesty and a therapist, I realized that I couldn't be in environments where, first of all, people were lying to me. Second of all, that I felt existentially unsafe. And third of all, where I felt diminished, demeaned, or belittled. I realized that one of the stimulus for this sort of chain reaction, this Rube Goldberg machine of negative patterning to play out, was conditional upon my environment. And the one thing that I could control was myself and my own actions, and essentially where I placed myself, especially while I was in this tender, fragile place of learning, healing, and becoming. It also took a moment to honor the versions of myself that brought me there, that developed those tools to survive, that effectively kept me alive. To thank them for their service, literally thank them for their service, and also create enough relative safety around me that they could put their weapons down and allow me to pick up new tools. It's very difficult to drop defense mechanisms when you consistently engage with environments that require them. It's hard to put down a pew-pew when you're always in a gunfight, right? And so in understanding what sorts of environments, what sorts of people, what sorts of dynamics brought out the worst in me, it allowed me space to arrive to environments, people, and circumstances that brought out the best of me, which allowed all of those defense mechanisms that had kept me safe in a very literal, material way my entire life to feel like they could step back and allow more healthy, pro-social behaviors to develop, flourish, and take the wheel. And that's not to say that those same defense mechanisms were kicked out of the car, but there's moments that they can hold the aux cable, there's moments they can be in the back seat, and there's moments in very real ways that I can rely on them to be there to take the wheel should I ever need it. There's so much stigma around concepts of rage, of violence, even of dishonesty. And I think it's very important to remember Lilo and Stitch style, that everything has and did have and did serve and serves a purpose in the right context. Context is king. And it's also important that we develop a really dynamic toolbox so that we're not using a shoe as a hammer all the time. Does that make sense? You have the right to understand why you do the things that you do. You have the right to understand and thank them for doing those things when it was necessary. And you have the right to put them at ease by responding to what triggers them and putting yourself in new environments where they don't need to be used anymore. And part of the way that it becomes safe to do that, safe to try new things, is because they're always still there, embedded in the deepest parts of you the moment you need them. So as you become softer, as you grow, as you change, as you become more adaptive and flexible, you can do so without feeling toothless. You don't have to compartmentalize out the parts of you that maybe have behaved in ways that aren't in alignment with who you are now. You can allow them to be there, boardroom table style. And maybe sometimes they get a stronger vote than others, but you don't need to excommunicate, nor do you need to cut yourself into parts. You're allowed to be whole and move and make different choices that honor each and every part of you as you grow and evolve. And doing that is how we develop emotional dexterity. It's how we develop distress tolerance. And it's also how we're able to learn and grow and iterate without being afraid that we're going to become very expensive therapized doormats at the end of it. Resilience is almost never gained through exposure therapy. Most people with active nervous systems need an effective cocoon before they can get good at doing the hard shit, at being in the hard environments that used to trigger them. There needs to be a point of relative safety, especially established within oneself, before you can arrive lucid, sane, and stable to situations that are not. You essentially have to teach your brain that you are safe in your own hands before you can go and put yourself in unsafe situations and act like anything but a frightened amygdalic cornered animal. And again, I'm not saying this should be the ultimate goal of learning how you work and understanding self-regulation, right? We shouldn't be healing so that we can shoulder more pain or endure more abuse. But it is important to know that a collateral goodness, a natural byproduct of developing this sort of internal safety and resilience is the ability to show up better when it's hard.